Welcome to Wayward Writers. I'm senior literary agent and author Heather Cashman.
I'm author and writing coach Stephanie Bearce.
And I'm author and writing coach Nicki Jacobsmeyer.
Our mission is to nurture and enrich established writers throughout their publishing journeys.
We welcome all genres, age groups, and publishing paths through video podcasts, online webinars, in-person retreats, and more.
We're here to help you conquer your path.
Welcome to our second part of critique groups and critique partners. We hope you enjoyed our first part, and so we're going to continue the conversation.
Absolutely. So I know we discussed a lot in the last one. What are some of the ways you guys have seen groups structured as far as, do you meet and bring chapters? Does everyone bring a certain thing every time? What have you guys experienced?
Wide variety. I think
Me too.
It's whatever works well for that individual group. And again, that's communicating what the expectations are. I've seen it where some groups have everybody can bring something each week or each month, whatever they're meeting. Sometimes you're assigned a week or a month or something that it's your turn to be critiqued. There are advantages to both. Sometimes if it's assigned and you have a lot larger slot of time, you can do a much more in-depth critique for the people that are there. But I really think it depends on what each individual group needs. And everybody needs to be brave enough to speak up about that. What do you guys think?
Yeah, and I think sometimes, I've been in groups where the people didn't really have time to do previous critiques. Mm-hmm. I think that really only works when you're doing small things like picture books or even like chapters of chapter books, because you don't have time to read a 10-page chapter in a critique session. Yeah. Like, you have to just do that ahead of time. I think there is value in that instant critique where you read it and you get critiqued right then from, this is like the instant reaction. And you can do that with like your first 500 words or whatever of your novel, if you want to do that. But I think also, I just want to speak to longer form critiquing a little bit, in which I think there is a danger to doing chapter by chapter by chapter, like once a month. I am currently critiquing with someone where we're doing chunks. We're doing like 3 or 4 chapters at a time. And it's working because we essentially have a synopsis of what we have read previously, and then we move on to the next few. The other reason it's working and that it can work that way is that we are not going back and revising those chapters before we're writing the next ones. And we're only doing broad developmental. If you're in a critique group where you're bringing your first chapter or your second chapter, then you go home and you fix that chapter and you bring it again, you're not moving forward. And to me, that can be very stifling. You have to be careful, and you have to make sure that the novel itself is actually getting written, and you're not just going back and critiquing the same sections over and over, because that is not helping. The other danger with doing short pieces like this is pacing. Because obviously when you're reading a chapter and then the next month you're reading another chapter and then the next month you're reading another chapter, there is literally no way to actually feel the pacing of that novel as you read it straight through as a reader. And so one thing that I have done to kind of mitigate that is you can go over a more detailed outline. You bring that to the critique group first. Right? And then they know the whole outline of the novel, and you can feel the pacing of the outline. If you're good at that, you can feel the pacing of the outline for the whole book. But in addition, I do think that you have to have some kind of critique group or beta readers who are going to read the full novel and help you with those issues, pacing and raising of stakes and things like that.
Absolutely. And I think one thing about a critique group and how you structure it, it can also be accountability group within it, because if
Mm-hmm.
everyone's bringing, I'm just throwing 4 chapters every month, or these people are bringing 4 chapters a month, then you go every other month or every other week. Like, you need to be ready for that, and you need to know that even though your chapters or story might not be critiqued at that time, that you're still showing up. Because I have seen that start to happen also, where it's like, well, my work's not getting done today, so it's not as important that I'm there. And like, that's not how a successful critique group runs, right? There's, life happens. But yeah, I will say, when it's a novel, I would prefer, even if it's the first rough draft or whatever, I would wait. I would prefer to be like, okay, can I have your entire novel? Because,
Right.
like you said, to me, there's so many big picture things that when I step away from that novel, or I'm like, oh, wait a minute, like, I'm bored to tears, or I won't know that, like, on a couple chapter by chapter basis. So, there's all
Yeah.
different ways to do it. I feel like with picture books or like poems and stuff, the entirety of the picture book or poem needs to come. I can't, if I'm just looking at 8 spreads like of a picture book, that's not, you're only going to get so much feedback back. You know what I mean? So I guess that's really up to you and what you all decide. So there's all different ways to do it, which is the beauty of it. And you might, at certain points in your career or in the process of that project, be like, okay, now I really need this. I need to find new partners that will read the entire book for me, because these people have seen it so much. I mean, there's, they've seen it so much that they're going to get sick if they see it one more time. Like, I know I've totally been that way for some of my partners. Like, we cannot see that anymore, Nicki. And that's just normal.
I think you can see a manuscript like 2 or 3 times, and
Right.
then you're pretty much like, you're going to start getting burned out on it, no matter who you
And I
are.
think that's another point for the critique, for looking for critique groups, is why you may need more than one. You may need
Mhm.
a
Yeah.
group that you're working with that's more of accountability and getting you through getting the whole novel finished. And then you may need people with fresh eyes who are willing
Right.
to take a look and talk to you about it too. So it makes finding that perfect critique situation just one more layer of difficulty too, because
Mhm.
you need those different eyes on it. Although that is, of course, why some people pay for developmental editors too.
Right.
It's
Right.
you can see why it's a very valuable service that's offered too.
Well, Stephanie, you mentioned in the last part of the critique group episodes we did about, you become friends and
Yeah.
you start to see the work, the project, through your friends' eyes, because you know what their intention is and their motivation. And right, you just start to get complacent in the fact
That's
that you're
true.
like, well, I knew what you meant.
There's just a lot of layers, I think, to critiquing. And sometimes you don't realize that when you're first starting out. You're just so excited to get anybody to read it, to get feedback. But that's part of, as I think, as Nicki was saying, as you grow and develop as a writer, your needs change, and your needs are going to change with your critique group too. And it's okay to explore new groups, add new people, and you have to adapt to where your writing is going with your critique groups too. It's important for you to keep growing. That's something that I really hope that I want to do, is I always want it to go higher, make it better. The next book should be
Mm-hmm.
better than the last book, I hope. Don't always succeed, but that's my hope.
So let's just talk about maybe some ground rules. We've talked before about the idea that you need to make ground rules, that you need to have some boundaries, maybe, or some expectations set out before you actually start critiquing, or at least in the beginning, you and your critique group partners need to set out some of these ground rules. So what are some good ground rules or best practices? Let's talk about that for making a critique group successful.
Nicki, give us what you think.
There's two ways that critique groups happen. Either you're with a group of people or that you think you all are on the same level and you enjoy, and it's let's start a critique group. So then everyone has their own thoughts and you try to compromise. Or maybe you're like, I want to start a critique group and I'm going to go find people. So again, you need to be flexible, but if say you have something in mind that you're needing specifically, then you're going to find people and communicate. This is what I'm wanting to start a group that meets this often, that we do this, that it's this format, this genre, etc. But I think frequency, everyone on the page, how often you're going to meet, what you're critiquing. Is it anything? Is it a genre? Is it a format? How does everyone go each meeting time? If not, how long does everyone get? It's tough if you're like, you can bring 10 pages, say. Well, that's great, but how much time do you have in those 10 pages? You get 10 pages in X amount of time. If you're only meeting for 2 hours or however long. So frequency, how much time people have, what you're bringing. I also think it's really good to state when you're sharing work, no matter what it is, what you are looking for and what stage that work is. I'm hoping to be as close to my final draft before I query. That's much different than I wrote this weekend and have only read it a couple times and fixed a couple things. I think that needs to be communicated. And also what I'm looking for. I'm really struggling with pacing. So yes, if you can give me a critique overall, but what I'm really concerned with is XYZ. What do you think, Stephanie?
I think I agree with all of that. I was thinking about you talking about your 10 pages or another way to set up a critique group. And I found that this is really successful, but this really takes commitment is that you're sending the material out at a certain point in time to the critique group. It is actually critiqued by you with track changes and returned to the person before you meet. And then that person that's to me, this is the most efficient way of critiquing because you get the written critique from all of your critique partners to look at. And if you're the one being critiqued, you can go through, find the questions that you have. It eliminates that whole problem that we talked about needing a Tootsie Pop so that you don't talk back because you're getting the critique and feedback. And it's really almost much more like what you would get from an editor because you're getting written feedback. And then you can use your group time to ask questions of your critique partners. You said this and this. What if I did this? So it becomes much more of a brainstorming and a problem fixing format. I love being able to do that, but I do think that that is something that is much more for people who are experienced in doing critiques and have done it before. But it's a super efficient way to get through a lot of information and everything ahead of time. That's the way I prefer to do novels, especially if you're doing huge chunks like first act, second act, third act of the novels and doing it that way. So it can be pretty efficient. But that kind of critiquing, while it is probably for me the most helpful, you have to find the right people to do that with. But it's a great format.
Very time consuming.
I agree. I think that's probably the best format that exists. And you can have a critique partner that you actually almost never meet with. Or that you may never meet face to face with, but you just exchange your manuscripts and you do everything via track changes. And then sometimes maybe you'll meet to just, like Stephanie said, discuss the changes or discuss questions you had about what they said or about their edit letter or about their comments in your manuscript. These partners and groups can take on many different things. I think some other ground rules, though, are like deadlines and respecting deadlines because we're all busy. And if you ask 100 people if their life was hard right now, 100 people would say yes. And so Yeah, I mean, or 95 of them. Like, everyone's going through it. It's one of those things where you obviously need to give grace, but you also need to set up deadlines so that there is an expectation there and everyone knows what they're supposed to do. And so that later on down the line, if the critique group isn't working, you can say, these are our rules and this is not what's happening. And so I'm struggling. I'm struggling because of this or whatever. Well, the other thing I was thinking about is just behavior. And maybe this isn't something that we like feel like we need to talk about, but I also think that you need to set some kind of guidelines so that people understand. And maybe you need to bring somebody into your critique group to teach you how to critique, or maybe you need to listen to some podcasts on how to critique or whatever. But I think everyone should try and be on the same page of what is a good critique and how can I be positive and how can I be constructive without making the other person feel terrible. Because I will be honest, I have made people feel terrible
Me
before.
too.
And I didn't ever intend it. I never, ever intended it. But like maybe it was while my father-in-law was dying and I was stretched so thin that I literally didn't have a moment to catch my breath and I was getting 3 hours of sleep a night. Sometimes we can be not our best selves. And so I think that at least just having some kind of foundational expectation of what the critique actually should look like is also a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
I
And I think
agree.
also,
And I have made people cry.
I think all of us would agree that we, with no intention of hurting anyone's feelings, but that came across that way. So, what is, like, how can you get a group balance of constructive criticism along with encouragement?
Wow, that's a good question.
I think it's a matter of being conscious of how often you are being positive. I will go through a manuscript and I will just write all the things that I'm struggling with. I'll make the track changes, I'll do grammar changes, whatever. But then consciously going back and looking for things that you enjoyed or looking for things that worked. I do think that that needs to be a part of everyone's critique process. And being very conscious of like, okay, in this section, I was really hard on them for this thing. Let's find a few things that I really did like about this section. And I'm going to be honest, there have been times when I have struggled to find things that I actually liked about a manuscript. And that's terrible to say, but it's the truth. If you have been in this business long enough, it will happen to you. And so you're not going to like everything. You're not even going to think everything is even good. Some things are going to hit you the wrong way because of some experiences you've had, or maybe things have really struck the wrong chord with you. You can still go and be objective, distance yourself, and find good things. And if you can't, then you need to possibly know that this is someone that you can't critique with.
I think those are good points. And I fall into that trap, especially with people that I've been critiquing for a long time with. I just instinctively, they should know that I think they're a fabulous writer. And so I mean, it's like, well, I wouldn't be critiquing.
Right.
Or they wouldn't be in your critique group.
You know?
We forget,
yeah,
right?
and so I forget to put any of the good stuff in there. So I mean, so I'm assuming that they know that everything that I didn't say I had problem with, I think is fabulous, and that's not good. So I thank you, Heather. I'm going to make sure for my critique partners that I go back in and consciously put in I love this. This was funny. This was delightful, because I think that's a good reminder for all of us when we're critiquing, because I'm terrible at that. Because truly, if I'm critiquing with you, I think your work is fantastic. And I don't tell you that. So thank you for the reminder. I appreciate that.
Do you guys think that if that is something you start feeling with someone that's now in your critique group more than once, maybe you're trying out a critique group, don't you think that's usually a sign that maybe you all aren't at the same level or the same goals? And that could be an answer if you're trying out a critique group. What do you think?
Absolutely. And I think it can even be content. I had someone in a critique group who didn't think they were writing erotica, and they were. That was not good content for me. We were not good critique partners. And she was new. She was a good writer. She just didn't realize that what she was writing was that.
Mhm.
And so for her, she was like, that's not what this is.
Mm.
And she joined the critique group that we were critiquing young adult and adult like genre fiction, and she was writing erotica, and she joined with this idea that that's not what she wrote, and it was. She was not a good fit for us. She needed to go find a
Yeah.
She needed to go
sure.
find a critique group that really was erotica writers, because that's what she did, and she was good at
Yeah.
it.
And it can
And
be
yeah,
even something not as extreme as that.
absolutely,
It
absolutely.
really
That was
can.
just
It's
my
like,
experience.
I've had times where people are writing something that I think it's okay to bow out, even if you're in a critique group that you are established with, and somebody has something that you're not going to be able to critique honestly and objectively. I think it's okay to say, you know what, I'm going to have to pass on this one. And it's not your writing. It's something that is triggering for me. It may be something that I have dealt with in my life, whether it's abuse or just a mental health issue or death or something, that you're not at that point. And I think that's one of those important things that we all have to be
Yeah,
grown ups and say, I need
right.
to be excused from that. And that's okay. And you need to be able, that is a part of a critique group too. There are times in your life where you're going to have to put a pause on it. And it's okay for you and better for the people that you're critiquing with too.
Yeah,
Good point, Stephanie.
I agree.
So, when you get this tough, conflicting feedback, what's the best way for us as writers to handle that?
Okay, define tough, conflicting feedback for me.
Well, I guess there's different types. So, perhaps the feedback is crass or unkind. And unkind, I mean, as in, not that the person told you to kill your darlings because it wasn't working for the plot, but unkind, like attacking maybe the writer
Mhm.
as a person and not the writing.
Well, I think that's,
I guess that's one
if
part.
it's that part, then for me, I'm like, peace out. Because
Yeah,
that,
I agree.
that's for me. If it's, you're getting that kind of feedback, um,
That's not a
yeah.
constructive group.
Mhm.
So
Right.
I think I would also leave that group.
Okay.
If it's more just feedback that you struggle with,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the advantages to having a critique group where you get to look at your feedback before you go to the
Mhm.
meeting. Because I feel like you can have time to have that reaction, to have that negativity, and then let that pass, let your subconscious churn, start to think, okay, do I agree with this? Even if I don't agree with this, maybe that's when you get to go and ask them, okay, this is, what did you exactly mean by this? Or what do you think is not working in this place? Or something
Or
like that. I
even,
think,
can you suggest to me, do you have suggestions for me to how to fix this?
yeah.
All sorts of ways to be able to talk back about it.
I think, though, if you don't have that, sometimes you just have to try and take it and say thank you. And
Mm-hmm.
then you go away from them. And that's when you like get upset or cry or, whatever. And then process it all. I mean, there have to be mechanisms for you to process all this stuff, and it is going to be emotional.
Sure.
I also think one of the things that is wonderful about working with a critique group is you will get different opinions on the same
Yes.
issue. And your critique partners may argue back and forth about what they want to see in the manuscript. And I have had what my rule of thumb is on something. If I have one person who really disagrees with something that I'm doing, I'll think about it, But if I have a critique group of 7 people and 4 of them all have the same problem with it, then I really take it seriously because there's probably an issue somewhere in there. So I do think having a variety of opinions and those opinions that coalesce on certain points and ideas that you may need to work on is really helpful. So,
Well, and I think the big word here is trust.
yes,
right?
Absolutely.
That's the idea. When you first start a critique group, you maybe don't trust the people that are there, and you have to build that trust slowly over time.
Mm-hmm.
And once you trust the people and you know them and you know they're not trying to just ruin your manuscript or whatever,
Right.
you can be a little more open. Maybe you can go there with a more open mind. I think the key is to try and be open and be vulnerable, which is very difficult in the beginning. And sometimes you are going to get hurt.
Right.
But overall, eventually you will find those people who are your people, who you can trust with anything that you write, and you know that they're going to have your back.
Well, one thing as a parent that I always tell my boys, and I think this goes with many communications and relationships, it's not so much what you say, it's how you say it.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's a huge,
it's nice to have more positive feedbacks in a critique than negative. And it's nice to start on a positive, get the stuff that you think needs more improvement, and end on a positive note. We're humans, no matter if we have been writing for 2 days or 2 decades. We're still people, right? We're all still people. And I think that's where the trust can be built. Even after one critique, usually you have an idea of this person's personality, their experience, and like each time that starts to build trust. And sometimes you might not always agree with that person, but respecting someone and trusting them, it's not that you necessarily need to go shopping and spend a holiday together, but you respect them and trust them with your work. It's kind of trial and error, which is tough, right? A lot of things in this industry are, you have to try first and see if it succeeds or fails. And sometimes it will fail, and that's okay, but you've learned and know now, okay, well, I really need this, or this isn't going to work for me.
So what are some things that you guys wish you'd known before you ever joined your first critique group?
Okay, you're going to die on this one. I did not know that you didn't have to have a published book to join a critique group.
Oh, interesting.
I didn't feel brave enough to join a critique group until I had a book contract. So, for all of you out there, no, you do not need a book contract to join a critique group. I highly advise going into a critique group long before I did.
That's a great point, Stephanie. And just because you don't have a book contract doesn't mean you're not a great writer.
It doesn't.
Great writers don't necessarily have books yet. So there isn't a you've made it moment where you're like, okay, now I'm good enough. That's great advice, Stephanie.
So don't do what I did. Go to that critique group long before you get a contract, and you'll probably get a contract a lot faster than I did. That's my great advice. What about you guys?
Okay.
What did anybody else wish they knew?
How about you, Nicki?
Mine's in the same vein in that I wish I would have joined sooner, now knowing all the benefits that come from them. And the first critique group I really joined that was serious, Stephanie was in it. And I guess my work had become such my baby because I hadn't shown it to anyone. You know what I mean? Like, and I thought it was so good because my children and my husband said it was. So then when it was like, these things are good, but all this needs to be redone. It was so shocking. But like, I did go home and I cried happy tears. My husband at the moment was like, oh my gosh, they made you cry. Are you ever going to go back there again? And I was like, these are happy tears. Like, I finally have found a group of people that I can trust, that are going to encourage me, but that they're going to help me become a better writer. And so I wish I would have taken that step sooner. I did not have published work. So, I was still okay going, but it was just that I waited too long. I thought it would be okay and it would be enough. And I think that because I went before I was published, that helped me get a contract, because not only did they help me with my writing, but they helped me network.
Yeah.
Like, Stephanie told me, have you submitted to these publishers? And I didn't know what I didn't know. And my first contract was with one of those publishers. So it's not just about the writing. A community is about networking and building each other up. So if you're not in critique group, find one.
Yeah.
We can help you if you have questions. And if you're in a critique group and it feels stale or stagnant or not giving you what you want, then I'm not saying you necessarily leave that. You have to evaluate it, but seek out another partner or another group. You can have more than one, like we've discussed. So that would be mine. How about you, Heather?
I think for me, when I joined my first critique group, I had no idea how much time it would actually take to read everyone else's manuscripts and actually spend time on it. And I also falsely believed that everyone would be as detail oriented and as enthusiastic about critiquing as I was.
Yeah.
And I ended up feeling very disappointed by having put in a ton of effort and time into other people's manuscripts, and then I got back a few paragraphs on a whole novel. Yeah. And so I think that going into it with certain expectations, and then I also felt like I couldn't leave. Like, I felt like, oh, these people are like, they're like, who else am I going to go to? Like, this is all I maybe will ever find. Or don't feel boxed in. Like, don't feel like that. There are so many opportunities out there. You will find people, and it's just one of those things where you have to just try people out.
I really like what you said about trying people out and building the community, both of you said. I do think we all have to remember that this, you also, like, you're finding like-minded people. So you want to find people, if you want to publish your work, you need to find a group that's going to publish, because that's going to be very different than a group that is doing it as a hobby. And that's one of the things I also wish I would have known too, is to make sure you're looking for a professional group rather than a hobbyist group, because there's a big difference between that. So I think evaluating what you need out of the group and trying to match that to the groups that you visit is important. And if you're working towards it as a professional, whether you're indie publishing or trad publishing, whichever you want to do, try to think of it as a job. And you're interviewing people. It's a part of the job interview. You're interviewing your coworkers that you're going to be working with for a while. They're interviewing you too, and just really have a bit more of a professional attitude towards it. It's not so much we're going to have our feelings hurt like on the playground, but we're going to deal with it all as adults in a professional atmosphere.
Okay, so last question. I'm sure we could talk about this forever, but what are some examples of how being in a critique group has helped you or other writers improve their work? I say let's go personal here. How has it helped you, Heather?
I think that it's maybe difficult for me to talk about this a little bit, because before I was an agent, I had critique partners. And once I became an agent, I lost all my critique partners.
Oh.
for one reason or another. It's one of those shifts that people see you differently, and it becomes more about you being an agent, and that they are good, kind, wise people. And it never was not the intention of any of us to happen. It just did for various reasons. And I really struggled for a long time because I didn't know how to find other critique partners who were at the level that I was at. But I
Sounds like you
think
have a
that
level of complexity added to your finding someone. Yeah.
to my critiquing with other people. But in the beginning, critique groups really helped me to just, I don't know, have a little more confidence. When I actually saw other people and I saw us all struggling sometimes with the same issues, or I saw us like, okay, like I can see this in your work, but I can't see this in my own work. So it helped me open my mind to the fact that I really did need an editor. I really did need someone else to be looking at my stuff. Even though I maybe was a good writer, you can still be a great writer and need someone else to look at your work. And I think that the other thing that I really have learned is that writing is such a solitary thing that you do when you're actually typing away or writing, however you do it, that I think that we can sometimes, or at least I did, get really inside my own head. And I loved doing that process. Like I loved writing, and I still do. I love writing and like losing myself in the world that is being created in my imagination. But there has to come a point when you leave that space and start working on the actual craft of it. And you have to start like really honing your craft and your skills. And there are some people in my life who have just like really, really helped me do that. And I feel like without them, I would still be back in that spot, where I was still having a good time writing. But like Stephanie said, I would still be a hobbyist. I wouldn't be pursuing publishing or being in the publishing industry at all. I would still just be doing it for fun.
Good advice. Nicki, what have you learned?
Well, I know I wouldn't have become a better writer or gotten an agent or been published or any of those things without my critique group. And I knew going in when they allowed me to stay, and I tried it out, but I knew right away it's where I wanted to be if they'd have me. And everyone was a better writer than I was. I knew that. And that's what I wanted. I wanted to be the worst writer, but good enough that they'll keep me. And it was like iron sharpening iron. Isn't that the phrase? And that's how I feel. I had to put in the work. Obviously, you have to put in the work, right? But behind every great writer is great writers supporting them. And and even when I've needed fresh eyes and I've maybe paid for a critique or asked someone else who was a writer, there's something that was said that clicked differently. They were virtually a stranger and I just saw it and they were completely objective. And I think being vulnerable is something that is huge. Being vulnerable and being brave. I think it's the most reward. You can also get hurt, but I think in the end, the reward is so much better. And I think people see that. And vulnerability breeds vulnerability. And all those things happen together. And I just think there's nothing more special than being in a critique group or having a critique partner and seeing that person get a win, whatever that is, and celebrating that with them. That is like you've won in a way. And I don't know about you all, I enjoy celebrating wins as much as possible because there's more wins than losses sometimes in the publishing world. We just have to define the win the smaller ones. We need to define them and we need to celebrate them. And what better to celebrate it with other writers and community. So
Absolutely.
how about you, Stephanie?
Well, mine's the opposite attack or opposite track. I have to say that the biggest thing that I get out of critique groups is the gumption to keep going. Because if you haven't been in this industry a long time, you will find out if you stick with it, there are dry spells. There are spells where your creativity is not there. There are spells where there are no contracts. There are spells where you just want to quit.
Yep.
And I don't know, every writer I know has had those moments. And that's where I feel like my critique group has come behind me and said, no, you don't quit. And that is so helpful to have somebody who has your back. And it's like, yeah, it's okay. You take a break, take 6 weeks off, take some time, but don't leave us. Don't leave writing. And I've always found that whether I need to break or whatever it is, coming back to it and having those people checking in on you, making sure that you're actually going to come back and write again.
Where are you? We missed your face.
It's been critical because there are times when I'll just be honest, I'm like, I'm giving this up. I could earn more money being a greeter in Walmart than I can do doing this. But it is my passion and it is my love. And I'm really grateful for those people who are there when I forget that. And those are the critique partners who are checking us like, I really want to read this story that you're working on. I really want to see that. And that's just a huge help. So I hope that's what I want to be for other people who are in my critique group and for other people is to be that encouragement for them because there are hard times. We do need to find the wins. And we need to be there for each other saying, hey, where's that story that you started that I really need to know what happens next?
For sure.
I love that. It's true. If you have those people, those anchors in your life, it definitely helps. I just went through that this weekend. I'm done with everything. That's it. I'm out. I just want to go.
Sometimes it happens more than once a year too. So
right. And it's nice to communicate with one of those people and be like, hi, so I've decided I'm done writing. Wanted to let you know. Right. Tell them because they know and they'll explain why your words need to be in the world. So we hope this encourages you all to go out there, find a critique partner or group. If you have questions, we're here. Email us.
Yes.
We're a community and we're just excited to be a part of it.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Wayward Writers.
Let's connect. Find us at waywardwriters.com, X, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook.
See you next time. Conquer your path.